All right, my apologies for being conspicuously absent for extended period. I was sick when I got back. I had a lot of grading to do, and I've been spending some time trying to establish where we're at in the course and where we're going to try to organize everything so that the next few steps in the next few weeks will be much more productive than the last few. So, what a good Java programmer knows. There are certain tools that every good programmer needs to know how to use. There are several pieces to the Java programming language: operators, brackets and symbols, keywords, and then there are some standard classes that everybody needs to know how to use, and then there are algorithms and data structures that are just programming in general, not specific to Java. We have covered tools, operators, brackets and symbols, maybe not explicitly, but we've been using them, and most of you have shown that you can use them well. And then keywords. We need to get into some standard classes. We've used them in some projects, and you've seen them, but we haven't explicitly studied them. And then algorithms and data structures, you've seen some of that in assignments before, but I would like to make that more explicit as well. So tools of the trade, the JRE and JVM, the Java Runtime Environment, the virtual machine. You can't run programs without it. When we set up our computers, you installed the JRE and JVM, and then the JDK, the Java Development Kit. You can't create Java programs without it. So you need the JRE or JVM to run the programs. You need the JDK to create new programs. And when you're setting up your computer, you did this. You installed Eclipse. That's our programming environment. There are lots of other programming environments. Eclipse just happens to be free and probably the most common. The other tool we have studied is YUML.me. It helps us design Java programs. That's the assignment where we created the UML or diagram, the class diagram. Brackets and symbols. So there are round brackets that are used with conditional constructs like if and for. They, in the case of an if, they go around the conditional statement. For, they have three pieces: an initial execution, a condition, and then a final instruction. Squiggly brackets that designate a block of code. You can think of them as grouping a bunch of instructions together. Square brackets, they're used with arrays. We had a little bit of experience. We definitely had a quiz where we studied arrays in a little bit of depth. The semicolon placed at the end of every instruction, the quotation mark placed around string literals, and the apostrophe placed around characters. That's the majority of the, if you want to think of it as the punctuation marks of the language. And then operators. We spent a good bit of time learning the Java operators. Most of these you're somewhat familiar with because they're related to math: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. You've covered modulus. The assignment operator, so the single equal sign assigning a value, unary operators, the plus plus, the minus, the exclamation point for not, equality and relational operators, the double equals, exclamation equals for not equals, less than, greater than equal to, less than equal to, and conditional operators, the ands and ors. So you need to know what these operators do, and I think you are pretty much all okay with that. You need to know the precedence order, and I think you all have gotten to where you're reasonably okay with that. And certainly if you don't know, you can look it up. You can always use round brackets to force a precedence order, so that's an additional use of the round bracket, and you should be comfortable with that from math, your math classes. And then you know what data types the operands should be. So an operand is the things that go on either side of the operator, or in the case of the unary operator, they just come after or before, just on one side or the other. In the case of the exclamation point, the operand comes after. In the case of plus plus and minus minus, I'm going to say the operand comes before. So there are certain operands that are expected, like the relational operators have got to relate things that are, well, generally numbers, okay? So bigger than, less than, unless it's a double equal or a not equal, then the double equal and not equal can compare just about any two things that are the same. But the greater than, less than has got to be something that has an order to it, and generally numbers. Conditional operators have to have trues and falses on either side, or some expression that evaluates to true or false. Arithmetic operations deal with numbers. An assignment, you can have a value on the right and a variable on the left. And then know what the data types they evaluate or return. So in the case of conditional, you've got trues and falses on either side, and it evaluates to true or false. In the case of equality and relational operators, you've got other kinds of things on either side, but once you throw in a relational operator, the entire expression evaluates to true or false. Unary operators, the plus, plus, and minus, minus would be integers. The not would be a Boolean. And you get the idea. So know what the data types of the operands should be and know what they evaluate to or return. There's a little bit more to this, these last two steps that we haven't talked about yet, but we'll get to. Keywords, we've studied most of them. Boolean, char, int, double. Those are your data type. And I've thrown in void and null, sort of as data types, but they're a little bit different. Constructs, if, else, and for, you should be familiar with them. Exiting, you've seen return, I think, when you're returning from a method. And then break is a way of exiting a for loop early. So return will get you out of a method, break will get you out of a for loop. Error handling, try and catch. We have seen that in projects, but we haven't really explicitly studied it. Scope, we've covered some of this. Public and private you should know. Final and static you definitely know. Import you should be comfortable with. The keywords this, and super might be a little bit of a mystery at this moment. And then I say the class keywords, well, the keyword class is used when you're creating a new class or creating a file that defines a class. Abstract extends, implements, and interface. You should be mostly familiar with these. And the keyword new for creating a new object, allocating memory for that, you should be familiar with. And so that's all the keywords. Now, standard classes and interfaces. We've seen the use of some of these in projects, and you'll be a little bit familiar with some of it, but there are certainly things in here that we have not covered yet. And I want to make this all much more explicit. So there is a class called math, and we use it for the trig function, sine, cosine, tangent, things like that, and then some constants like pi. It'll also give us the ability to generate random numbers. Array list, we had a quiz on that. You should be very comfortable with array lists at this point. It's for storing a collection of objects. String is a class. It's for handling textual information. You should be somewhat comfortable with string, but there are probably a lot of things in the string class that you're not yet comfortable with. The object class, which is the default superclass of any other class. You're familiar with the concept of it, but there are probably some things inside of object that you don't know what they are yet. There will, even at the end of this year, there will be some things in object that you don't know. We don't cover every detail of Java. It's just that would take years. But there are a couple of things that we probably ought to talk about at some point. System.out.println. It has a lot more uses than that, but that's what we use to print text to the console, mostly for debugging. And then drawing stuff. JFrame to create a graphics window, the graphics class to draw stuff in the JFrame, and the color class to set the color of the graphics object. And these should be reasonably familiar at this point, although JFrame, there's a standard construct, and that might have gotten a little bit muddled at this point, so we'll see a little bit more of that. Handling user input, you have seen mouse listener and mouse event, key listener, and key event, but we haven't, I don't think, explicitly covered it to the point where you are necessarily comfortable using it in your own applications. You might be okay, some of you will, but I would venture to say that the majority of you have seen it but aren't real comfortable. A little bit more advanced programming, comparable, which is used with collections, and collections, which allows us to easily sort objects. I doubt that any of you have looked into that at all. And semaphores, used to coordinate multiple threads. I have used them in a couple of projects that we did without much explanation, and that needs some explaining at some point. And then when you're programming, and this is not specific to Java, but every good programmer knows a few algorithms and data structures. Algorithms is a process for completing some task. So you've seen find max and find min, you've probably implemented it. Find total, calculating the total of something, finding the average of something. We've had those in assignments. Shuffling, so say you have a deck of cards and you'd like to shuffle it. There's an algorithm for that that is efficient. Sorting, putting things in order. So we will probably use the collections class to sort things, but there are several different sort algorithms that could be learned. Searching for something, so if you've got a collection of something, trying to find the one item that you want based on some criteria, that's an algorithm that every programmer needs to know. And there are several different variations. And then data structures. Stack, linked list, array, and trees are the four big ones that programmers generally start with. And we haven't really got to much of that yet. So that's pretty much everything that I would really like to cover in this course. And so in the next video, I'll dig into some details of an implementation of a new project, and I will also dig into some details of each of these things that we're learning in the course. I will post a copy of this slideshow along with the video.